struggle to survive in Dominica, getting harder and harder. If you can survive here, you can make anywhere. When your own government will not help you, financial institutions don't care about you. As a young singer and a struggling man, I really fall in here with my homeland. Oh, imagine me as a singer in my Dominica on my own. So getting concession while me as a young man on my own. All politicians doing the same thing. This morning foreign man and them they help me. So they're to turn, struggling alone. Youth with frustration, is gangs of migration. What you expect young people to do when the system leave them on their own? Yeah, eyes, Dominica. Let's love our country, love each other. And I wonder if I live and run, would life out there be any better? One farmer who abandoned his land told me sadly he can take no more. When you see you're the one who gives the most, and it's you who suffer in the world. As a farmer here in my country, I can provide for my own family. Imagine me as a farmer in my Dominica on my own. So getting concession while me a local man on my own. All politicians doing the same thing. For the foreign man, they always help me. For the country able, once you plant the seed, we just have to work it. With help we can make it. When hurricane come, farmers down to run. When government leave them on their own.
All right, that is where I want to say a special greetings and welcome to all of you locked into that space at this time. It is 6 minutes past the hour of 6 o'clock in Dominica and the Eastern Caribbean. Whatever time it is in your neck of the wood, greetings and welcome. Welcome to Civic Vibes. That program is aired each and every Sunday from 6 p.m. This evening is a no different of a program. We're going to have a very interesting program right here with our very special invited guests. No stranger to us in Dominica, in the name of Dr. Thompson Fontaine. He is the leader of the United Workers' Party in Dominica, an economist by by profession. And so, yes, we're going to hear from him this afternoon in a very, very special way. And so the topic that we're about to discuss here this evening is all about Dominica's struggling economy, and who better to tell us about that economy, sort of looking back as to where we were and looking as to where we are today. And also, of course, looking forward to a much better and brighter day, as it were, days, as it were, for things to come in Dominica. So yes, folks, today being the 21st day of April 2024, and that is where we want to make that all-important start. Welcome to all of you who are already on the live feed here. Please share that live as we get started here, make someone know that that program is on, and they too can be part and parcel of what is happening here. The numbers to the program to call in sometime later, I will plug in those numbers in the live feed later so that you guys out there can have your contributions come in as well. But yes, without much delay, much more delay, let me move across to Alvin Thomas. That brother is always there. I don't know where he gets that laddie why, as it were, but he's always there. Alvin Thomas, good evening to you, my brother, and welcome.
Yes, good evening, Brother Lofty. Good evening, good evening. Yes, it's a pleasure to be back again yet another Sunday where we can have this little conversation with our folks and speak to some of the issues that affect them at home in particular. So I'm delighted to be back again, and of course to have my good friend there, Dr. Thompson Fountain. Dr. Fountain and I have a very long relationship. We go back many years, many moons, as they might say. So it's always,
absolutely.
Yes, it's always a pleasure
absolutely.
to engage with someone like himself, who is a very intelligent man, I must say. Young man, I will add at that. You know, I always like to rub that in you, Lofty. I'm the thing on the panel, Lofty. Lofty don't like that, Dr. But, you know, I have to rub it in sometimes, you know. It tells,
You know,
it's on my appearance. You can see it.
Alvin, these were the days when our interactions, man. These were the days when anything was possible in Dominica, man.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, there was so much hope and optimism.
Oh, my God.
And
yes.
yeah.
So I'm happy to be back, and of course, to say a pleasant good afternoon to all our folks who have already locked in. You know, I was saying the other day, Lofty, I mean, they have a word they call shangwe. Whenever we do have a program, our people maybe have a shangwe, you know.
Yeah, I know.
But yes, we're looking seriously and discussing a very important issue as it relates to economic development. What else is a government's role, major role, if not to provide for the economic growth of its people, as well as promoting what one might say the human and social well-being? And clearly, if we are falling short of that, it begs the question for us to have that conversation. So I'm looking forward to engaging with this topic and to hear from our folks who already, as I said on the live, they too have concerns that they normally would express through the live feed on Facebook, YouTube, various social media platforms. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Alvin, for your opening remarks here, opening salvo, as it were. We already have a number of first persons on the live feed. Alvin will go through some of these names in just a bit before we actually make a start indeed. But yes, I started with this song of Brother King Dice, Dennis and Joseph by name 10 times, Calypso Mona, Calypso King in Dominica, and will be performing sometime in St. Thomas, I'm being told. He sang this song sometime back on my own, and it really, really, really is a true testimony as to the conversation that we're about to have here this evening. And so, yes, thank you very much, King Dice and Brother King Pat. Let me call him King Pat as well, for, you know, penning those words, and Dice being the executor on stage, as it were, capturing 10 times the Calypso title in Dominica. Yes, folks, we said here before that Dr. Thompson Fontaine is here. And whenever Dr. Thompson Fontaine is here with us, we expect a very, very high caliber program. And so this evening, we're going to have one such program. I can tell you that. The economy is on everybody's mind in Dominica. The young, the not so young, the elderly, just name it. A lot of young folks in particular, the adolescents, the young people, they are taking social media. That is where, you know, their platform is. And they're expressing in their own way the perils, the turmoils as it relates to the struggling economy in Dominica. So we have a man who is tipped to be the next Prime Minister of Dominica. And so, yes, he'll be exploring some of the issues as it relates to the struggling economy in Dominica at this time. So, Dr. Thompson Fontaine, let me just open up your mic now and for you to say your hi and hello to the many folks who are tuned in already. Good evening, brother.
Yes, Lofty, good evening. And of course to Alvin, good evening as well. And to the many, countless numbers of persons who are tuned in to the live feed. And on Facebook. What an honor it is for me to be here with you again, Lofty. Every time I come on your program, it's always a great outing. It's always a great time to share information, and we always get a good vibe, from the persons who tune in. And I think tonight will be no exception. So delighted to be a part of the program tonight and looking forward very much to the discussion myself.
Yes, indeed. Alvin, on behalf of the Civic Vibes team and the many, many folks, the multitudes locked in at this time, we want to say a thank you very much, brother Dr. Thompson Fontaine, for taking time of your schedule to be here first. Dr. Thompson Fontaine, where we want to start tonight is you gave a sterling contribution last night in Antigua and Barbuda. I can tell you that contribution has been resonating so far on the ground in Dominica. And we want to start with you there as the icebreaker, as it were, just give us a little more detail as to, and the invitation and the execution of that very important contribution you made in Antigua and Barbuda last evening. But before we go there, Alvin, we have some persons on the live feed. Let us just run through some names.
Yes.
As we are moving along here.
Yes. Of course, we have Eliza Louis Gomes, always there, never missing. And then we have Dave Bertrand, who says, good evening, lofty Dr. Thompson Fontaine, listening. And then we have Rosa Robinson, Claudia Carlton, Justina James, Clara-Lynn Warrington, Anthony Simon, Marlene Schillingford, Veronica Pascal, Carol Olivachi Bruni, always on board as well, and Martha Lucian, Judith Cochran, Miliana Watson Duvany. Do I got that one right, Lofty?
Yes, you're right there. Yes.
John Felix Sylvester, Peter Carbon, of course, Simeon John, Annie Edwards, Zed Lloyd, our brother Zed. Good afternoon, brother Zed Lloyd out there in NY. Hope you're doing fine, bro. Carol Ann Ford, Ivinia Joseph, she normally refers to this as a university. She said she's present in class. So she's normally early, so she don't get any detentions or demerit.
True,
so
true,
good,
true.
Ivinia. Gertrude Abraham, Deja, Marina Charles, Alfia Rennie. Who else do you see, Lofty?
Let me see here. We have Jess Viville, Usila James, Dave Bertrand, you mentioned that name already. Hetty Lawrence, Claudia Carlton, Justina James. We also have Anitha Adams, Bernard is watching, Clara-Lynn Warrington, Cecilia Bedminster, Anthony Simon, Marlene Schillingford, Evangeline Nichols, Judith Cochran, Veronica Pascal, Martha Lucian. We also have Selma Louis, Carol Olivachi Bruni, you mentioned that name already. Starring N. Carter. Yes, good evening to you, my friend. June Felix Sylvester, Santia, Tias, Francisca Deluge, Ivinia John Baptist, Simeon George, Brother Peter, yes, Carbon, Annie Edwards, Carol Ann Ford, Zed Lloyd, good evening to you, my brother, indeed. Keep the faith, my brother. Marina Charles, Manuelin Pierre, Althea, Rennie, and Jonathan and Aliyah. Dira, good evening to you. We also have Vruni Vashi. Good evening to you as well. Chandra Senval. Yes. Dana Philbert Peterson. Dorothy Regis. Claudette Durand. Maury Jules. Owen Prosper. Marina Charles. Yes. Evelyn Nichols. Evangeline Nichols. Sorry. Edith John. Gadier Deleuze. Georgette Henry. Miss Adelaide Paul. Angela Paul, sorry, tongue twister here. Dorian Dorival, Dominic Last, yes. Mary Lorio, John Francis, Joel Joseph, Bryna Francis, Earl Francis, Valda, Ilwa, Franklin, Timothy, and yes, the list goes on and on.
Marlene Pascal. Marlene Pascal is also one who's not always been locked in for sure.
Yeah, we have to move on here in the interest of time. It's already quarter past the hour. Yes, but all those of you tuned in, thank you very much. Your duty is to share that live information. Yes. So, folks, those of you just tuning in now, we are here with Dr. Thompson Fontaine for a very interesting 2-hour program. And so, without much more delay, let me just move across and ask Brother Dr. Thompson Fontaine to elaborate a little more on just how he went about executing that sterling contribution that he gave last evening in Antigua and Barbuda. Thompson, again, welcome, my brother.
Yes, Lofty, thanks. And thanks for the opportunity as well to talk a little bit about last night. It's one of those things that you just never quite imagine could happen, and it happened. Actually, my relationship with Antigua and Barbuda goes way back to the time when I was even at the International Monetary Fund. The radio stations in Antigua would normally call for comment, and that relationship continued long after. So every year, without fail, when there is a budget in Antigua, they would call for my comments. During the pandemic, they would call to find my comments about the economy, give ideas. So in a way, I am known. I'm known in Antigua and Barbuda through that radio interaction and always commenting on the economy. And there were always very good reviews. So I was told last night that when the committee, or they were looking at persons that could talk to Antigua and Barbuda, my name was the first to call. Dr. Baldwin Spencer was the one who said, "What about Dr. Fontaine?" And that's how the invitation came to me. But what I was trying to do last night was to paint a picture of how similar our situations are, both in Dominica and Grenada, as far as the political dynamics are concerned. We are both suffering under the Labour Party governments. We are both in a position where everything has been done and tried by the ruling party to stay in office. So we have a lot of commonalities there. But what I did not realize was the very personal and emotional impact of the speech. It only hit me afterwards when I was done and the event had ended. And several people came to me, including some grown men, and said they were in tears. They were crying during the presentation. And I was like, "What? You what?" Says, "Yeah." Well, they said, "Me, big man, I was crying during the presentation." So that's when I think it began to hit me on the emotional aspect of it. I mean, when I was delivering the speech, I could feel the crowd. I could feel people were into it. You could hear a pin drop, except for when they were applauding. But nobody was moving. Everybody was, listening and taking what I was going to say. And it kind of struck me as to how important that moment was and the impact that I think I was able to have, not only on the people in Antigua and Barbuda, because it was being advertised. In fact, when I returned to the hotel this morning, as I was getting set to leave the hotel, this lady runs up to me and said, "That's you. I saw you on television last night, Dr. Fontaine. This was great. This was, and I got that this morning." So I think it resonated very well within Antigua and Barbuda. And also because it was honest. I was speaking from my heart. I was trying to convey to them the difficulties that we're having in Dominica and how that's a shared purpose. I don't know if you realize in the speech at one point when I asked the question, I said it does not happen. Surely nothing ever happens in Antigua and Barbuda. And people were like, no, yeah, they feel, and I think it was because of the empathy. They felt something of what we are going through in Dominica. It resonated in that way. And I think that is what made it all the more spectacular in terms of how the speech went on last night.
Yes, indeed. And Dr. Fontaine, as I told you before we entered here live, trust me, that speech has been resonating as well in Dominica with our Dominican people. So, my brother, thank you very much. And kudos in terms of you bringing to the fore our situation in Dominica to the Antigua and Barbuda people over there.
Yes. Let me just say on that, though, Lofty, and Dr. Fontaine made the point. I mean, I have been, I've had the opportunity to deliver addresses myself at various levels. And when any one of us here, you could listen to someone delivering an address and you could sense the authenticity and the being realness in it. In other words, you could easily find a difference if you come and someone say, well, you're just reading off a script. And I think that was the difference here. You could sense that in Dr. Fontaine's delivery. You could literally feel it. And I think that's what resonated so strongly with the people. And the people likewise will engage. I mean, you could say a speech, deliver a speech, And people are just, you know, indifferent. They'll hear it, they might say, yeah, yeah. But you could hear how they were responding. And when he put the question in the way he put it, I think that was so effective. And like you said, Lofty, I think and that is why, unfortunately, there's you hear that sometimes. A prophet is never regarded in his country. It's so sad. And you hear that sometimes, but you could hear that resonating because I listened to it. And like I said, anyone who would deliver addresses and would listen could actually make the difference. So again, job well done, Dr. Fountain. I think you made us proud. You made us proud in your delivery. And I think we are all better for it, as I dare say.
Yes, indeed. And Dr. Thompson Fountain, just for clarity, sir, can you just give us an idea as to, you know, on what platform you were speaking from in Antigua and Barbuda?
Yes, so this was the convention of the United Progressive Party. That's a party that was in office in Antigua and Barbuda from 2004 to 2014. They won 2 terms. That's a party actually came out of a unity of parties in the early 1990s that came together to try to unseat the birds in Antigua. You know, the birds that were there for over, I think, 30 odd years. And this coalition of parties came together under the United Progressive Party, and it took them about 12 years before they could get into office. They came up in 1992 that they were formed, and then they were in office in 2004. And they were defeated in 2014 by the current Labour Party. And in the last election, which took place in January of 2023, they came very close. They came very close to winning again, but it was just by 1 vote that the ruling party was able to secure. So they have a 1-seat majority right now in Parliament. So I was addressing their convention. It was a week-long activity, but they were having the opening ceremony last night, where they invited not only myself, there were also speakers from Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago. So there were also speakers from, in fact, the speaker from Trinidad and Tobago was none other but the daughter of Basvio Pandey, former prime minister herself. She's a very prominent attorney and also into the politics. She used to be in Parliament, but now she's kind of moved away from the opposition party, and she's setting up her own party right now to contest the next elections. And in fact, you know, coming out of my presentation, she was like, you know, the Caribbean needs to hear you. The Caribbean needs to hear and understand what's going on in Dominica. Because I'm in politics. I didn't know those things were happening in Dominica. And so the invitation on the spot was extended to me to be in Trinidad and Tobago towards the end of this month, of May, sorry, towards the end of May, to do a similar presentation to the Trinidad and Tobago public. So I think it's a good opportunity. I think it's good to be able to let the rest of the Caribbean region know exactly what is going on in Dominica as far as our politics is concerned.
Yes, indeed, Doc. And as you said that day, it is very, very good that we make those linkages in and around the Caribbean region, which we live in particular, because trust me, a lot of persons don't even have a clue. They don't have an idea of the plight that we face in Dominica, especially as it pertains to good, accountable, and transparent governance in Dominica. So yes, that invitation to you by Trinidad, the representative in Trinidad, that can only augur well for us in Dominica in moving forward. Again, Doc, thank you very much. The common thread, the common theme on the live feed here is that you did us well, and so thank you very much indeed.
Much appreciated, much appreciated.
Yes, indeed. Alvin, let's go in terms of the conversation we want to have with Dr. Thompson Fountain. Can you open that up for us, please?
Certainly. Well, let's see. How do we start on that? I think in my comments earlier, I indicated that one of the major roles of any government is to provide for what one might call a a stimulant or an active economy, economic development, whereby unemployment is taken care of. Someone can get employed, work, make a decent, wage, standard of living. And at the same time, you would have what one might consider a better human and social well-being. By that I mean, your health sector is thriving, your education sector, your economic sector, your banking sector, So yes, you will have your pockets of challenges, but overall, you could say, well, you are in an economy that is surviving. Unfortunately, we don't seem to be in that space at the moment. And as the conversation unfolds, I will ask Dr. Fountain, as an expert, because I consider him an expert in that area, as an economist and an expert in that area, and someone who have worked with the IMF for a number of years. What is his take on that? I know the IMF issued what they call their I think they call it a quarterly report. He will clarify.
Article 4.
Article 4.
Right.
Article 4. And they predicted that Dominica is expected to have an average of a 4.5% growth rate for the 24-25 year. What I would like Dr. Fountain to do for us this evening is to break down all this technical jargon. Because the man on the street here, GDP and PDP and all those kind of jargon and 4.5, and just tell us in a very layman way what that means and what should be the expectation of the average man on the street. There's this woman who may have a job, struggling to pay her mortgage, to pay her bills, and this young man who can't find a job. How does that 4.5 or whatever they're talking about, how does that translate to them in their day-to-day living? So maybe Dr. Fountain can begin by just giving us an overview based on what he knows as far as IMF report. I know there's another report that was developed recently by it's called an OECD OECD project that was developed to support the OECS countries. And it was a strategy that they put together to run from 2019 to 2028. We can talk a little about that as well, where they have certain targets and stuff like that. So, but just to get the ball rolling, how do you see our economy where it is? What are some of the major challenges? And what kind of outlook that you foresee for the average man on the street, man and woman?
Okay, so Alvin, I'm going to take you up on explaining in very basic terms what we mean, because sometimes we use those terms and we assume everybody understands what we are saying. And since we're on Civic Vibes, I see persons referring to it as a university, their class. I think it's an opportunity to explain a few terms. Now, every country produces, okay? And you can have either physical goods or you could have services. So you have different services like the banking services, insurance services, construction services, and so on, all right? These are all the different kind of services that you could have. So what you attempt to do is you attempt to measure the production, the total production that takes place during the year. So in the case of Dominica, we're an agriculture-based economy. We will try to see how much did we produce in terms of tons of bananas, in terms of tons of dasheen, in terms of tons of other things that you can do in agriculture, in manufacturing. How much soaps did you sell? How many peanut butter jars you sold, and so on. So the idea is to try to determine how much was the output of the country. Now, why is this important? Because this output usually translates to income or to revenues. So, for example, when the farmer produces dasheen or bananas, he will consume some, but for the most part, he will sell some to take care of his family. So the idea of production also has the idea of consumption, but it also has the idea of creating some kind of income. And there is a common way in which all the countries do it, and they call that the gross domestic product. So the gross domestic product is really the combined value of all your goods and your services produced within a given year. Now, there are different ways of measuring it. The most popular way is what we call the gross output, where you just look at real outputs in terms of the outputs that come out of the country. And the other way is to look at it in terms of a very famous equation in economics. All of you who've done 101 economics or economics 101, you would know this equation: C plus I plus G plus X minus M. All right, consumption plus investment plus government spending plus net exports will give you your GDP. All right, so that's just a different way of measuring. But at the end of the day, what you really want to get is the measure of the country's output, and that way it becomes comparable. So because we are using the same measure in all of the countries, you can then compare country by country. Now, the wealthier a country is the higher their gross domestic product. And the poorer a country is the lower their gross domestic product. All right. Now, we said that it is the value of goods and services. So there are two components to it. There is the price component and there is the output component. So, for example, if you produce 10 bags of dashing, that is the physical output. If you sell those 10 bags at $10 a bag, that's $100. This $100 is made up of the 10 bags times the $10 per bag. Okay, so your basically your output is always in two quantities: a volume and price. That's what gives you the value. Why I'm taking time to explain that is because the way you measure a country's growth is you measure their output, but because it includes a price component, in order to get what the country actually produces or the value that accrues to that country, you want to remove the price component. Okay? So let me explain that even further. So let's make it very simple. So in 1 year, let's say in this first year, we start in fresh our economy, and all we do in that economy is we produce 10 bags of dashing. Okay? We sell these 10 bags at $10. That gives us $100. Okay? That's year one. Year two, if we produce the same 10 bags of dashing, but now prices have gone up, we sell those 10 bags for $20. We will show that our value has moved from $100 to $200. But our real output has not increased. We have produced the same amount we produced last year. So if I were doing the GDP for that country, I would say, well, in that year two, our real GDP was zero. There was no real growth in the economy because we produced the same amount or the same output. We produced the same output. We had more money, but the high money we had was a result of the price. But when you're measuring a country's growth, how a country is growing over time, you have to remove the price component. And there are different techniques that are used to what we call deflate the price, so that you take off the price component, so all you get. All right? Because it is quite possible, for example, that you could, in year two, instead of producing the same 10 bags, if you would produce 15 bags, even if the price fluctuates, but you produce 15 bags, you would have had a 50% increase in your output. And that is what's important, because to produce this additional 50%, why it is important? You will need to probably hire additional farmers. You probably have to get additional inputs and so on to go into the production of this additional 50%. And that is why you look at the real output of the country and not the nominal or just the value output of the country. So when we hear that the economy grew by 4% or by 5%, we are saying that in real terms, we have removed the price effect. We have seen in real terms the economy has grown by that amount. And that is basically how it is done. And you do that for each of the different sectors of the economy. So you do that in agriculture, you do that in construction, So for example, when we measure the growth rate in construction, we look at the number of housing starts, the physical number of units that would have started. So if in year one, you build 100 homes, in year two, you build 105 homes, that would be a 5% increase in the construction sector because you have produced 5 additional homes compared to the previous year. Okay, so if you notice, the growth rate is always on account of the previous year. And that is very important because when you have a shock, as you had during the COVID pandemic, your output falls. You have a serious downside in your output. So it means that in subsequent years, you will most likely record a higher growth because your calculations are done on your base. You see? So it's a percentage change. All right. So and again, to put it in very simple, and that is the reason why you will find, for example, in the case of Dominica, over the past 10 years, we are growing at about 1%. That has been the growth rate. That has been the real growth rate of Dominica, 1% over the past 10 years. Suddenly, you have the COVID-19, the economy drops by 15, 16%. In the year after that, you might find that instead of the 1% growth, you're now going to get a 6, 7, 8% growth because you're calculating the growth over the previous year. And because the previous year, because if you like, your denominator has gone down lower, when you divide, you're going to get a bigger value. So that's why I said usually the 3-4 years after any major disaster, you will have exaggerated growth rates. Because what the economy is doing, the economy is going back to its normal level. It's going back to where it was before that shock happened. So in the case of Dominica, in 1 year, we lost 15%. So it will take us 6%, 3%, 3%. That's 6, 9, 12, 3%. So it may take us 4 years to get back to where we were in 2019. So that's why that's very important. And that is why when people see those huge growths, they say, but that's not what the country does. That's not what the country is producing. And they're right. It's kind of exaggerated because it's just the way it is calculated.
Yes, indeed. All right, Doc, I realize you maybe need to take a little water here, so we're going to give you that break to do just that. Alvin, yes, can you filter based on what Dr. Thompson Fontaine just said? Doc, take that break, yes.
Yes, I think that is a valuable explanation that he has given because, you know, and at the end of the day, I remember what his name, one of the Bush, the president of the US, he had a very straightforward slogan. Are you better off now than you were last year? That's all he asked the citizen. Are you better off now than you were last year? Because like Dr. Fontaine have just said, if we depend solely on those so-called GDPs and those numbers that we are blasting all over the place, and like he explained, how they say next year the growth rate is supposed to be 4.5, you might say, ooh, that looks good. But bear in mind, as he said, that is on the previous year. And if that previous year was low, like because of the pandemic or because of some disaster, then that doesn't really truly reflect. At the end of the day, you ask the man on the street or the woman on the street who walks into Whitchurch, who has to shop, and you do the same, so you could speak to that more directly than I can. You go into Whitchurch and you say what? A family of maybe 4, husband and wife, or, you know, partners, whatever, and 2 kids. What's that grocery bill should look like? Basic. $600 a month, 500, 700, I don't know. I mean, 800. And then you have a mortgage. You have your mortgage to pay or your rent. The average mortgage, you would say, for a basic, if you bedroom, single unit house. Then you add on your gas bill, your electricity, your water. I mean, so if you add up all that together, you're talking about what? $3,000. I'm just throwing stuff out of my head. And then now, when you factor in your income that you get, so you're on the average income, the public officer in the public service, if you want to use that as thing, maybe private sector, what's your average salary? $2,500 a month, $3,000 a month. So clearly, I'm saying all of that to say this 4.5 and 5.5 and GDP and all of that, when you relate it to what's happening on the ground, and you can see that there's no new manufacturing plant opening, you can see the boat is not shipping out tons and tons of bananas or dashing. You can see we don't have a plant that open doing water. Clearly, our economy is in a tailspin. Go ahead, Lofty.
Yeah, all right. Thanks, Alvin. Doc, you are speaking about some numbers, and we appreciate those numbers indeed. What really we want to really get down to tonight in terms of the economy of Dominica, which is very, very sluggish at this time, it is to, as you were on the track, let us speak to the average man. Let us speak to the ordinary man as to what can they do, what can be done to help them through this struggling economy. And so one person here, Selassie Kenrick, has a very important point here that I want you to pitch off from. It says here, how does this explain? I guess he was listening to you, Doc, in terms of your explanation about the GDP and the percentages and the numbers. How does this explain how you would alter the average man's life on the street? And that to me epitomizes the discussion we want to have tonight. Because as I said before in the opening statements, a lot of Dominicans now, in particular our young people, they're finding it very, very difficult to make ends meet. I know the ultimate goal is to remove the government so that fresh minds, fresh hands, persons could come here with much more, innovative thinking. But we are in a situation and we have to deal with it. What can be done now, Doc, to help curb the situation that we're going through as we speak?
Okay, to help me explain that, I have to use a little bit of more numbers, but
no problem. But just bear in mind that is the kind of conversation we want to have, is to let the ordinary man understand where we are and what needs to be done and what can be done by them. Yeah.
Right. So the problem that we've had is that our economy has been growing by less, just about let's say 1%. I'll be generous, say 1% for the past 10, 15 years. We have estimated that for you to have employment, for you to have people getting higher salaries, your GDP should be growing, for the size of our country, should be growing on average by 6%, 6 to 8% a year. So the fact that we have not seen any growth, we have not seen any employment opportunities, we are not seeing none of that happening is because
Doc,
the economy has failed to grow.
Doc, I don't mean to interrupt you. Let me make sure I hear what you say correctly. You're saying our economy has been growing by about 1%. You're being generous.
On average, yes.
10 years, right?
Yes, correct.
And you're saying that should have grown by 6 to 8%?
Right. For you to have had an impact.
Right.
For you to have seen the impact, for you to have seen people increasing their salaries,
so it should grow by 6 to 8%.
Jobs being created. It goes back to what I was talking about earlier.
Okay. I just want to make sure.
Yeah, if you look at construction, you build 100 homes. Next time you build 105, you have to hire more people to build this extra 5 homes. Okay, but that has not been happening because the growth rate simply has not been high enough. Let me use an example of China, for example. China, probably 30 years ago, China was a backward, very poor, largely rural country. And then they began to develop. The way they developed was that they began to grow their economy. but China was growing by 15, 16, 18% every year for many years. And that is how they got to the point where they are. Because there is a certain level of growth that if you can sustain it for a long period of time, you begin to generate jobs, you begin to generate opportunities, people move out of poverty into middle class and so on. So that is why the GDP is very important. And for any government, a government like ours, attempting to grow the economy, attempting to create jobs, it has to be targeting a growth rate of between 6 and 8%. But because we have been consistently way below that level, we are seeing what we have now in Dominica, no jobs, because the economy is not producing enough. So there are no opportunities. The government itself is not hiring any more people. When people retire, they're either not replacing them or they replace them with somebody already within the service. So they shift people around as against taking in new people. For there to be growth within the government sector, you have to be physically taking in new people on board every year for there to be growth within the government service. So that's the issue that we're having. And that's why it is so difficult in Dominica those days. And that's why I feel very much for persons who are working to begin with. Let's start with those who are actually working. People who are working are having a lot of difficulty making ends meet. Persons are working, Alvin, I will tell you that in most of our supermarkets and so on, and in those kind of trades, they're making probably $500-700 a fortnight, if all that. Some of them make five. So you're talking about $1,000, $900 to $1,000 sometimes a month that
Doc,
they
Doc,
are making.
Doc, so
Yes.
sorry. Let me give you an accurate figure
Okay, even
that
better.
that a young lady gave me working in a supermarket on island. We're having a conversation and she told me that she's working as a cashier.
Okay.
And she's making under $1,000, $950 something.
Exactly. That's exactly
That's an
what I've been
actual
saying.
figure. Yes. So you can go ahead.
So it's in that range. It's in that range. Yeah. And the cashiers are better paid, right? So it means that for the person who's stacking the shelves, you're probably talking about $700 a month. Yeah. So that gives you an idea. Within the public service, the average salaries are $1,200. $1,200. So persons and some people have been working in that capacity probably for 10 years and they're making $1,200, $1,500. So that is as a direct consequence of the inability to grow the economy. Now, if you compare what has happened, say, in the last 10 years to what happened in the heyday of the banana sector, our economy was growing by 4 or 5%. It was still at the 6 to 8% we wanted, but at least it was growing at about 4, 5, sometimes 6% a year. And that's the reason why the economy was a lot more, there was a lot more activity. Public servants could get salary increases. There were a lot more people working and so on. Okay, because the economy was able to support that. We have not had that in a very long time. And that to me is one of the biggest failure of this administration, the inability to create the level of economic activity that would allow people to not only have a job, but have a good paying job. Okay? Because if you have somebody, as you said, making $900 a month, and then the average rents for a one-bedroom house, probably $700 in Dominica, around Roseau at least, I believe the average rent for a one-bedroom house or one-bedroom apartment is about $700. So imagine you're making $900 and you want to go out on your own and rent an apartment, and you have to pay $700 just for rent. That means you have $200 to play with, to take the child to school, to feed yourself, to feed your family. So you begin to understand how difficult it gets, all right, for the average person. And that's the kind of suffering that we're seeing in Dominica today. We have, very, very low salaries. And it is very interesting because I taught in high school in Dominica. Now it's probably over such a long time, probably close to 45 years or so ago. And the amount I was making then, people are making it today. The amount of money I was getting then, over 30 years ago, that's the kind of money people are still making now as teachers. All right. Now, 30 years from now, if you count 30 years and look at the rate of inflation and how prices have gone up, you probably could buy a full grocery cart 30 years ago for $500. Now you cannot get that for $500, right? For the same amount of money, you get a lot less because of inflation. That's what inflation does. It bites into the value of your dollar. And that's the reason why it is very important that public servants, and not only public servants, but even those working within the private sector, that's the reason why they must be getting salary increases every year, because a salary increase is meant to make sure that you stay even. You don't get disadvantaged, because every year prices go up. Prices never go down because we're in a kind of a very interesting type of economy where prices tend to move upwards. The only prices that tend to move downwards are usually related to technology. And that is the offset of technology. So for example, you might find that a cell phone today or a 50-inch television is cheaper today than it was 10 years ago. And the reason why that is the case, because technology has accommodated for that. Because of the advances in technology, it has the impact of pushing the prices down, not up. So most electronics and anything having to do with technology, you'll find that over time, they get cheaper. On the contrary, stuff like foodstuffs that you consume on a daily basis, that is not necessarily impacted by technology, they tend to go down. They tend to go up and stay up. So, for example, a gallon of oil today will most likely cost more than it cost 5 years ago. A can of tuna, a can of sardines, even a loaf of bread tend to be higher today than it was. So what you find that consumer goods that you consume, especially goods that are consumed, they tend to go up in price. Whereas technology, because of the benefits from technology, those prices go down. So your television sets, the prices come down, your computers, the prices come down over time and so on. But what you're consuming tend to always be increasing. And that's the reason why it is very important that especially persons who are at that lower level, the cashier at the supermarket, the person at the lower rung of government offices, that these individuals get salary increases. And that's the reason why I was blown away and completely could not understand it, that a government minister or the prime minister would give a salary increase of thousands of dollars to government ministers, and persons who are making the $1,000 a month would get no increase on their salary. I find that to be mind-boggling. How do you encourage productivity? How do you encourage people to come out and work? And if they do come to work, they perform. I know sometimes, for example, we complain about the attitudes of persons in the government service. We go to a government office and people are not taking you on. They're not motivated. If I was making $1,000 a month and I'm worried about how I'm going to meet my rent of $700 a month, I'm going to buy food, and you come to get a birth certificate or something. I'm not saying that that's happening. I'm just using that as an example. Then obviously I'm not going to take you on. So don't blame me. Blame the fact that I've not gotten a salary increase in 10 years. I'm struggling to make ends meet. And I come to work only because I need that salary, because outside of that, I still have nothing, So that's the reality. And that's what I think you were talking about earlier, Lofty, when you talk about the average person on the street and what they're feeling. That's exactly what they're feeling. They're in a situation where their salaries have not been going up. That's for those who have. We're not even talking about those who've not been able to find work, those who have remained months and years unemployed. You can imagine the frustration under which the people of Dominica operate these days. It's a lot of frustration.
Yes, it's 2
and
minutes to
stress.
set. Yes, Doc, thank you very much. It's 2 minutes to 7 o'clock. We have to take that all important break in the next 2 minutes thereabout. But we have some comments coming in here, and one I note, Joshua Francis is here, an economist himself and also lawyer by profession. He's making that point here. It says, in spite of all economic woes of Dominica, he said, opposition politics is at its lowest, hence sustaining the very government in office. Your take, Dr. Fontaine, before we take that break.
I mean, hi, Josh. Good evening to you. I'm glad to hear from you. Glad to hear from you. I mean, yeah, the history of our politics is well known, right? And you know the battles that we have been fighting. So it's, in a way, it's not so much the opposition politics is low, is the kind of unfair playing field on which the opposition have had to be playing this past few election cycles. Right, and the reason why where we are is because of everything that we've spoken about, the very unfair way in which the elections have been conducted. Persons from overseas have been brought in to influence the vote. Large sums of money been paid for persons to come in selected constituencies. So that's the reason why we are there, you know. And of course, the opposition is everybody. And I think what you'll also find as well, Loft, is that the opposition, in terms of the numbers, are increasing every day for those very same reasons that we are discussing. People who cannot make ends meet, sure. People who have been working under this government have not received a salary increase. They can't see their way. They're really struggling. And I can tell you, Lofty, you know, in a way, we thank God for the United States and for Guadeloupe and for France and so on, because it is those remittances that are coming from overseas that have sustained a lot of families in Dominica. It is those barrels that the government still find a way to tax that are sustaining our people, because they can depend upon the family packing a bag of groceries for them or a barrel of groceries, and they can live off that. Without that support from the diaspora, things would be a lot worse than they are in Dominica. So we cannot overlook that aspect of it. So yeah, the opposition politics is one thing, but we have to understand that we have not been living in a fair world, as it were, as far as the politics is concerned, and that's why we continue to fight it and demand better, you know, so that we can change that dynamic.
Sure. All right, Doc, so far, so good. Alvin, so far, so good. We have a number of comments coming here. We'll get to that live feed in just a bit. But it's about that time. We're smack halfway in the program. And so we're going to take now that all-important break, play an ad from the Marigot Development Committee. These folks, they're doing something up there in the Marigot area. Let's hear from them now, at least 2 times for now. And then we'll get back to the live panel in just a bit. Let's see if we can pull up that ad from the Marigot Development Committee.
Join us for a day of wellness at MDC's Marigot Village Health Fair, taking place Friday, May 3rd, 2024, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at W.S. Stevens Primary School, Weirs, Marigot. Come get free health checks, including cervical, breast and prostate screening, blood pressure and diabetes check. This event is presented by Fresh Market Pharmacy and St. Andrew's Hospital Foundation in collaboration with the Marigot Health District and supported by Trois Pitons Water, Q95 FM, Afu Awi Big Shop, Digicel, Country Style Bread and the Marigot Development Corporation, MDC. Don't miss this opportunity to prioritize your health with us. Remember, your health is your wealth. See you there. Join us for a day of wellness at MDC's Marigot Village Health Fair, taking place Friday, May 3rd, 2024, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at W.S. Stevens Primary School, Weirs, Marigot. Come get free health checks, including cervical, breast and prostate screening, blood pressure and diabetes check. This event is presented by Fresh Market Pharmacy and St Andrew's Hospital Foundation in collaboration with the Marigot Health District and supported by Trois Pitons Water, Q95 FM, Afu Awi Big Shop, Digicel, Country Style Bread, and the Marigot Development Corporation, MDC. Don't miss this opportunity to prioritize your health with us. Remember, your health is your wealth. See you there.
All right. Yes, indeed. Your wealth, your health is your wealth. And from that is an ad from the Marigot Development Corporation, indeed. Folks, those of you tuning in now, we're talking to our invited guest here on the Civic Vibes program. That is Dr. Thompson Fontaine, the leader of the United Workers' Party in Dominica. No stranger to us in Dominica. This time, a very, very interesting conversation so far, loaded with information. And yes, we are moving on here. The numbers to call sometime later in the program, they are 245-2396 or 615-9470. These numbers I'll plug into the live feed, so you can take note of that if you want to have your comments or contribution right here on the Civic Vibes program. So far, so good. Doc, you made as we continue on here, you made a comment a while ago about the heyday of bananas, where our economy grew at least 4 to 5% thereabout. I just want to ask you, Doc, as we resume here, in terms of how we were before as a country when banana was king, as it was said, what was happening then with our economy that you know, the Dominican public, the ordinary man, woman would have much more monies at their disposal so that they could, you know, buy, shop, do whatever they needed to save, eat better, whatever it is, compared to now, where, as you said a while ago, we are much more technological, we are much more advanced, we have many more homes, we have many more vehicles, but for some reason, we cannot get it right from where we were and where we are now. So let's do some kind of compare and contrasting as to how our economy was then and where it is now, and some possible solutions in moving forward.
Right, and I'm glad you asked that question. A very important distinction between vehicles that you see now and vehicles that you saw then. A lot of those vehicles, because of the way the banana sector was operating, a lot of those vehicles were being bought from the proceeds, the revenues that farmers were making from bananas. Today, a lot of those vehicles you see, people are most likely borrowing or saving up for a long time to purchase those vehicles. So that is a very important distinction to make. Now, where you have, or when you have an industry like the agriculture sector, and you have the banana industry doing so well, it works not only for the farmers, but for everybody, because this farmer now has enough money to go and purchase goods from a supermarket. He will, when it purchases from the supermarket, the government will get his share of taxes on that, okay? So that the farmer is supplying revenues to the government, but at the same time supplying revenues to the private sector. Okay, so where you have an economy that brings in, if you like, fresh or new money every week into the economy, these monies get spent on other goods and services in the economy. So in a way, it helps to keep the economy afloat. It helps to keep the economy buoyant. What we say, the term we use is buoyant. It's like when you throw a ball on water, it just kind of bubbles on the water. It is buoyant, right? It just kind of floats on the water. That's exactly the water in that sense is the farmers getting those income, because every week a few $100,000, even a couple $1 million is coming into the country, and this money then gets spent throughout the economy. So that sustains the economy, it sustains activity. What you have now in this current scenario, you don't have that. You don't have this fresh money coming in from outside. So in a way, what you have is money is already just circulating around without a fresh if you like, a fresh burst, a fresh impetus from outside, so that the dynamic is a lot different. So that the person receiving $1,000, say, in salaries without any increase, that money goes the same way. It goes some money goes to groceries, some money goes to rent. But if in addition to that $1,000 person, if they were to receive an added amount, so that person now can then go and do a farm, and now they have an additional $500 a week, then they can spend in other areas because now they have new money. So anytime you don't have new money coming in, it is really a drag on the economy. And that's the reason why you might see a lot more in terms of vehicles on the road than we had back then. And again, a lot of it has to do with the price of the vehicles. Okay. I remember when I bought a Bluebird, a used Bluebird, when I was a teacher. That was my second vehicle I bought, and I could buy a car then as a school teacher in Dominica. I got a loan, but it cost me $30,000. I remember that very clearly. I bought it from Masterfans, $30,000. Right? With $30,000 now, you can most likely probably import your own vehicle and be able to sustain it. All right. So you have that differences that we had then, as I said, because we were making enough money, the cost of living was reasonable. So you could afford to go to the bank, get a loan, and buy a vehicle. For a lot of people now, they may get the vehicles, but they have to either save up for a very long time, or they have to take loans, some of them very high rates of interest to do it. So that's the difference you have. And like I said, the major problem for me now with our economy is the fact that salaries or wages are not keeping pace with the rate of inflation. It is not keeping pace with the increasing costs. So over time, people are constantly falling below. Ultimately, they reach the poverty line and then they fall below the poverty line because they're simply not able to actually keep up.
Yeah, Doc, thanks for that. Just before Alvin comes in, Doc, let me just ask you a very direct question here. In terms of our CBI program, we are hearing a lot of monies, well, have been, I must say, floating or coming into the country through that avenue. What is your take on that? What would you, Doc, do differently when you become Prime Minister of this country in terms of the CBI product and the monies generated thereof in terms of helping the economy so that, all and sundry could benefit thereof?
There is a very real fear, before I get into the real answer, there's a very real fear that because of what is happening now with the CBI program, by the time we get into office, there will not be any of that CBI money around. For a long time, Dominica was able to make a lot of money from the CBI program because they were kind of undersell it. We were the cheapest thing on the market. St. Kitts and Nevis was $400,000. Antigua and Barbuda was $200,000. So we were the cheapest thing on the market. Now, under those new rules, and most people missed it, but a few months ago, all the countries in the region, Grenada, Dominica, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua, that is now selling passports or have the CBI program, they agreed that they would all sell at the same price. Okay? So it means that we are now a lot less competitive. In addition to the blow we have taken from the visa restrictions from the UK, we are now also less competitive. So that means less money. So that money will dry up very, very, very quickly. So let me speak in a hypothetical. Let us assume that we had that kind of money that were available to this government. My understanding, and given my understanding of the way economics work, is that what you really want is sustainability. You want something that can work for you, that can make money for you. Okay? So if, for example, you as a parent, you have two children, right? And you decide to give each of those two kids $100 allowance. Now you give both of them $100. There is one kid, as soon as they get his $100, he takes it, he goes to CO, he basically spends it right away. And then the other kids say, boy, I want to go to college in a few years and so on. Let me save up probably $50. So he puts aside $50, or he finds something to do that can make that stretch a little further. At the end of the day, who do you think is going to come out better? Not the kid who's spending. They both receive the same $100, but the kid who was more conscious of sustainability. I need to sustain at some point. I will no longer have this $100 from my parents. I need to find a way to spend it that it can work for me. So it's a very simple calculation. With that kind of money, the government should have put this money into something that was sustainable. To me, the most sustainable thing in a country like ours is agriculture. So a lot of monies would have been plowed back into the agriculture product. That would mean some subsidies provided for farmers so that they can get the inputs, they can do their pest control, they can do their soil analysis, they can do what is necessary to increase production. So a lot of that would go into that aspect of it. So that we could boost our production of our raw produce. But in addition to that, monies would go into an agro-processing sector where monies would be used now to basically, again, employ persons. I would not, and I repeat, I would not, as the government has done, put money on an NEP program that simply supports people to plant flowers. Okay? That money would go better to farmers who would then be able to grow. You put some money into a factory, and the same young people who are now planting flowers, because the flowers, they wither away, the grass grows back, you have to cut it, but it is not generating anything. Compare that to a farmer who is planting something, who is growing something, and who is selling something. New monies are coming in. That new infusion I'm talking about, that new infusion is coming in. If you have a factory that is exporting overseas, that's an infusion of new money. Okay, so you want to look for where there's always an infusion of new money from outside of the country, especially. That is what generates the sustainability. That's what makes it goes on for years and years and years. But if you use it on programs like the NEP, if you use it willy-nilly on free housing, for example, these are not sustainable. So I found that the government made a lot of I don't know if it's mistakes or they just did not know better. But they could have asked, I'm sure they're experts, but I'm not the only expert in economics. There are several good experts who would have been able to advise the government on how to use those resources. But at the end of the day, they have not used the resources wisely, and it has simply been frittered away. I always think of I don't know if it's a myth or there was really such a person, a guy by the name of Buga. Did you have somebody called Buga?
Yes, that name ring a bell.
Right. I think he was a gentleman who won some lottery in the UK. This is everybody's story, right? He won a lottery, and then he came to Dominica and was basically giving all his friends, throwing parties. Everybody made me, man, hold that, And before you knew it, all Booga's money was gone. And people would say for a long time, they would tell you, I'm not Booga. It's like, don't ask me for money. I'm not Booga. The government has been behaving like Booga almost, in the sense that to them that money was like a windfall, and they frittered it. They gave it to MMC. Some of it went to MMC. Some of it went to wherever. They threw some on the NEP program. They did this and that, but they did not guard it. They did not reinvest it. And when you think about it, when I think of where St. Kitts was in 2012, 2013, I remember when I was there doing the project for the St. Kitts government on their debts, they were asking me for advice on how to invest their CBI money. They were looking at sustainability. They were saying, what investment instruments can we put money? Can we put some of that money into the stock market? Can we put some of that money into T-bills? What can we do so that money will make more for us. Government never asked that. He never asked that. Buga could have put some of that money in the National Bank and get a 5% every year and be sustainable. He did not do it. So I'm using that example to say that you can be that spendthrift. You can just be spending without thought of sustainability. But that is what I would do differently, Lofty. I would have really been able to beef up the manufacturing sector, the agriculture sector, so that when the inevitable happens and the CBI program is no more, those industries that I had started would now be making the money. Money will be coming from overseas, fresh inputs from outside, sustaining the economy, helping to create new jobs, helping to expand, helping to grow. None of that is going to happen. We would have lost this billions and billions of dollars. At the end of the day, the country is worse off than it was with it.
We were not hearing you. Oh.
It's almost like they talk about having this winner's curse, in that you get a windfall. At the end of the day, you become worse off for having won it. The country is worse off having had CBI resources. You cannot look around and see anything sustainable, because of the bad decisions that were made. And it is truly regrettable. The monies were not reinvested. The monies were not used in sustainable industry and so on. At the end of the day, we are worse off than we were, and our people are suffering.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to summarize it, Dr. Fountain. It's like someone winning a lottery and have, well, first of all, never thought they would have won a lottery and win all that millions of dollars and have no idea how to invest it and squander it and use it on frivolous stuff, and eventually they become broke. And we hear that story all the time.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Alvin, let me just make an announcement there. Folks, it is 7:20. We're going to open up those lines to you guys at 7:30. So in the next 10 minutes, I'm seeing a lot of live comments under the live feed. Please save me and Alvin some of our voice, as it were. Please call into the program. The numbers are plugged into the live feed. Again, I want to repeat. They are 245-2396 or 615-9470. These are the numbers to get your comments, your suggestion in the conversation here. All right. Yes, Alvin, sorry about that.
Yeah. No, but I think Dr. Fountain has touched on a number of issues. And I'm reading the live feed too, and folks are making their comments there, some of which I would comment. Some, it's not relevant to the issue. Most of the time, we must deal with the issue and don't stray away. It is a fact. It is a fact that Dominica economy is the worst within the sub-region. And by sub-region, I mean the OECS. We don't have time this evening to go through the numbers, but I'll be happy to present those numbers in a subsequent program. But it is a fact that St. Kitts is doing better than Dominica. The last time I checked, St. Kitts' debt to GDP ratio was like 63 or 64%. Okay? The last time I checked, St. Vincent debt to GDP ratio was below 100%. Antigua, Grenada, St. Lucia. Now, bear in mind, St. Vincent doesn't have a CBI program, but yet their debt to the GDP ratio was lower than ours. Our debt to GDP ratio was over 100%. Basically, what that means is that we are owing, we borrowing a lot of money, and we are in debt. That's basically in common parlance. You borrow, you are over your head, and you're in debt. So, for example, out in the US, you'll go for a loan, and they'll tell you what is your debt to income ratio. How much money you make vis-a-vis how much money you're owing. Your mortgage, your car, your credit cards, blah, blah, blah. And when you add up all of that, the bank might say, you got too much debt, Yes, you're making $5,000 or $6,000 a month, but you have all that debt. Your debt to income ratio is too much. So we have a very high debt to GDP ratio. Okay? And I think Dr. Thompson made the point very well in terms of money in the economy. That is how any economy operates. Money have to flow. as they say, it have to flow. And the way money flow, it comes in one hand, it goes in the other hand, it goes in the other hand. It trickles. And if the IMF, and I'm looking at a document from the IMF, it's dated July actually of last year. And they were talking about, they were making some comparisons over a period, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years. So they were looking from 2018 and projecting all the way to 2028. And making projections, of course, for 2025, 26, 27, 28. But looking at past period from 2018. And it is clear, even from our, how does the government get its money? Revenue. You have taxes and non-tax revenue. So you have direct income tax, you have corporate taxes, you know, all of that. And then you have non-tax revenue, which is where the CBI comes in. And over the period from 2018 to say right about 2023, thereabout, even 2022, 2023, their non-tax revenue percentage as a percentage of government central revenue was way more than their tax revenue, which means to say they were depending heavily on the CBI money to run the country. And here's another information in that document, which again, as I said, we may not have time to go over it. There is what is called the FDI. That stands for Foreign Direct Investment. Okay? Foreign Direct Investment. Over the period, the same period I talk about, 2018 to 2028, projected out to 2028. In 2018, the FDI as a percentage of part of the balance of payment of government was 14.1. In 2019, it was 10.3. In 2018, it was 4.3. That was right after the what you call it, the hurricane. Then it went up a little to 6.1, 6.6, 6.4 in 2023, and in 2024, 4.8. Projected for 4.6 in 2025, 4.5. So what it's telling you there is that foreigners are not investing in Dominica. There is less that foreign direct investment coming into the country. So couple that with less foreign direct investment, with us not utilizing the CBI properly, with us not generating and stimulating the economy, then it's a recipe for disaster. And it's as easy as that. And I guess the question that folks on the live will ask, and several people will ask, what do we do? And how do we address that? It seems to me that over the years, I think the government has run out of ideas. And like I've said on this program already, elections has consequences. If you choose the wrong people, you elect the wrong people, you will get the wrong results. And as I will say, although we are discussing the economy and looking at all of that, at the end of the day, if we don't change the trajectory of things, things will remain as is. And the only way to do that is to ensure we have that electoral reform that we've been talking about. We have an even playing field. And like the CCJ said, do not go in another election until you remove the tails. And let us ensure that we have people who knows what they're about. At the end of the day, whether it comes as a collective force and whatever it takes. I mean, Thompson spoke about the UPP in Antigua as a collective group. Over time it happened. Baldwin Spencer is a trade unionist. I know Baldwin very well, very, very well. You know? And we ensure that we get somebody to manage our economy, to manage our country, so that people can have a better life, a better way of living. One other thing, in the current Article 4 of the IMF that they issued on March of this year, March 18, 2024. Hear what the IMF says, and I'll quote. The IMF commended the government of Dominica for its effort to decrease spending, citing the decline in the public wage bill. And Thompson alluded to that. If you're not hiring people in the public sector, obviously the wage bill will go down. It recommended further civil service spending and make tariffs adjustment on key public services. You hear that? Notable water and sewages, which is a basic commodity, a basic right. We can have another.
By the way, it has happened. It has happened already. They just announced a sewage increase, a water and sewage increase.
Medical service to strengthen the financial position of state-owned enterprise. So on top of that little $900 that that this cash or whoever is getting, our water bill now is going to go up. So instead of taking 2 baths a day, she have to take 1 bath a day now, and maybe twice a week, and sponge. And then now, her medical bills. So if she has a lump in her breast, and she need to go do a mammogram, and then she has to go do an MIR, and then she has to do an ultrasound, and all of that, that fee is going to go up. Okay? So I think I want to paint it in that raw manner so we understand it and we stop passing the buck and talking and raising all the other questions that we're raising of who should do and opposition and that. And each one of us start where we are.
We have a responsibility. We have a responsibility.
Each one of us start where we are. Stop asking and pointing to the other one, and let's do something to change the trajectory of where we are today as a country.
Yeah. All right, Alvin, thank you very much. It is 7:30 on the money. And so we're going to go now to the live feed to take some of the comments, question thereof. Therein rather, Celia Gordon writes, that is a question, a direct question to Dr. Thompson Fontaine. So you said after disaster or pandemic, the economy presumably considers being growing. But she would like to ask, what are the indicators that they use to measure that growth? Yes, Doc.
Right. So the process is still done the same way. But as I said, it is not, the growth is exaggerated. In other words, it is not actual growth. It is just a recovery. Okay. How can I put it in non-numbers terms? It's like imagine you're a football player, right? And then you just suffered a broken leg. Right after you've suffered this broken leg, the way you're able to contribute to the team diminishes, right? Because you're not the same fully fit person. You have to kind of climb back to where you were previously with therapy, with time and so on. So during that time, your output is not the same. Similarly, because you have that huge decline, remember what you're doing to calculate the percentage growth is just like any percentage increase. To calculate the percent increase, you take the new value minus the old value divided by the old value. Okay? So if your old value, which is in your denominator, is now much lower than it otherwise would have been, you're going to get a bigger growth. So the calculation does not change. It is just the process of a recovery that we are seeing. And it does not mean that there is necessarily new growth happening. So that's what I was trying to explain. And that's why you find very often after a major block, like when there's a major hurricane or when there is something like a COVID, you'll find that you'll have much bigger growth rates than you otherwise would have had because the economy is in a recovery phase.
All right, thank you very much indeed. Alvin, let's see through some comments and questions here on the live feed. And folks, yes, it is your time now, so please feel free to call in. Petra Carbon writes here, in my opinion, we can help change the lives of people in Dominica without having large sum of money. We can donate our time teaching financial literacy to our youth, developing program to each of our young adults with, let me take that again. We can donate our time teaching financial literacy to our youth, developing program to teach our young adults ways to become financially independent. That's a comment from Petra Carbon. George, listening to the program here. Selassie Kenrick comes back and right here. There's still potential for high-class bananas. Like we have all rich athletes and celebrities always eating bananas. All right, that's his comment here. Let me just see if we can get some more comments in here before we get back to Brother Thompson Fontaine on the live feed with us here. All right, Nugent Thomas says here, question Lofty. Looking ahead, Mr. Fontaine, there is so much talk in the air about the US dollar tanking in the near future due to the BRICS movement. How would that affect the EC dollar? And another question says, and will it affect further the cost of living? Yes, Doc.
Yeah, okay, that's a very good question. Now, the US dollar moves, what we call it moves against currencies. But these are only currencies that are what we call that are allowed to float against the US dollar. So for example, the Jamaican dollar against the US dollar is floating. The Guyanese dollar against the US dollar is a floating currency. But the Barbadian dollar against the US dollar and our own EC dollar against the US dollar, it is not a floating currency. It is a fixed currency. What that means is that the values move in the same direction. Okay, so it will not impact us. In other words, if the US dollar tanks, as it says, and basically what it means is that the value of the US dollar goes down, it does not impact us because we maintain that same ratio. It will still be $1 US for $2.70.
Yeah.
That will not change. But in a country like Jamaica, where now I think it's about 125, 150 Jamaican dollars to the US dollar, what you'll find now is that the Jamaican dollar will get stronger. It might now move from 125 or 150 to probably 110, 100 against the US dollar. Okay. But when you have a fixed exchange rate, the dynamic there is a bit different. Now, I think the discussion really around the US dollar is what has made the US dollar so powerful is that is accepted in practically every single country you go. If it's one currency you want to have on you when you're in a foreign country, is the US dollar, because practically every country will accept the US dollar. So there is that acceptability. It is also the currency that is used for clearing transactions. So when you have foreign transactions, if you're buying or selling cars, for example, with Dominicans, when you go online to import a vehicle, the currency that the Japanese quote to you is not the Japanese yen. They quote to you the US dollar, because that is how they clear their transactions through the US dollar. It is that acceptability that has made the US dollar powerful. Now, if suddenly tomorrow the world finds that it is better to go with the euro, people thought for a long time that the euro was going to overtake the US dollar. But now the US dollar is now more powerful than the euro. At one time it looked that way. There was a time when the euro was really moving. There was that acceptability. Well, you have, it's like 20 countries coming together. And surely that currency must be stronger than the US dollar. It never happened. For a long time, that speculation drove up the value of the euro. But after we realized it was not going to happen. And now the US dollar has surpassed the euro. There is a lot of talk that the BRIC currencies, that is Brazil, Russia, India, South Africa, China, that these countries, if they have a currency, it will surpass the US dollar. It will depend on whether or not the rest of the world accepts it. Whether or not, when you buy a car in Japan, they tell you, okay, you need to pay me, not in US dollars, but go to your bank and ask your bank to send to us that BRIC currency. Okay, that is when you're going to know if that currency will become powerful. Until that time, the US dollar will continue to be the predominant or to be the strongest currency because it has acceptability. Everybody accepts it for payments. Everybody wants it. Can you generate that same level for other currencies that are coming up? So I think it's a bit premature to say that the US currency is going to tank because of that new arrangement between those countries. It was supposed to happen. I mean, when you think of the idea that the United States, the United Kingdom, Germany, France, Italy, Spain, Greece, all of these Nordic countries, Sweden, Denmark, all of those countries coming together with one currency, surely this would be more powerful than the US dollar. Never happened. All right. So I think it is just something about the US dollar. And a lot of it was not by mistake, because the world system was on the gold standard. Gold, every transaction had to be backed by gold. So we had what they call the gold system. But when the Bretton Woods system, the IMF and the World Bank came into existence, they kind of did away with that gold standard, and now the US dollar was the currency of choice. And since then, it has remained the currency of choice, and it has this acceptability around the world. And that's why it would be very difficult for it to be moved aside. It's not going to happen that easily.
Let me just add very briefly though, just on that same thing. In our part of the world, that is why too that EC dollars of ours is quite good and stable, and that is because of the OECS countries together coming as a block to have that EC dollars, and that's a good thing for us. Imagine if each of those islands, Antigua had its own currency, Dominica had its own currency, and before economy be what it is, we'll be finished.
We will be finished.
We'll be finished.
Absolutely.
I'm telling you, we won't even exist on the map. But that is a good thing. And as a result, it's a saving grace. And to touch that currency, in other words, any decision to move that currency or do anything to it has to be a full collective decision. It can't be one country, it can be 5 and 4 or 3 and 1. It has to be every one of them together. And I think that in itself speaks a lot. And that is why when we are looking at Dominica's economy, we can't just look at it in isolation to the rest of the sub-region and the other islands within the OECS, because we're in this thing together. If one is behaving bad, and we saw it with the CBI program, if one is behaving bad, it is likely to affect the other. So I just thought I wanted to make that point. But in terms of the feed, if you go back to the feed, there's a question here, Dr. Fountain. Valina Raphael said, Dr. Fountain, would you see factories using the country resources as a way to go forward?
Absolutely,
I suppose
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. You have to, I mean, talking about agro processing, that kind of thing, that is one way forward for Dominica, absolutely.
So elaborate a little what you think. Give some actual, examples that I know you mentioned agro processing. I know we had DCP, we had Bellows. A lot of folks are raising the issue today. One of the natural resource that we are blessed with that many countries around the world do not have is water. How do we use that natural resource as our oil then? That's our oil revenue.
That is
generate revenue for the country. So you might wonder, could you say something on that?
Yes, absolutely. That's one example, water. Of course, I'm thinking as well of the how we call it, the perfumery. These bay oil and bay leaf and these are the things that can be used in the perfume industry. You can have that industry around those, you can also have something around the different teas, all of these wonderful bush teas that we have can be packaged, can be put in the factory, and can be exported. These are all of the resources that we have now that we can use, of course, the obvious ones in fact, I saw in St. Vincent, they're making this bread, this flour. They're making flour from I think it's from the dashing, and they are making flour now, and people are using that to make their bread and so on. And, I mean, these are things that we can do. And Alvin made a very important point. St. Vincent has not gone down the CBI road. St. Vincent has done well on basically on services and on agriculture. St. Vincent is a much stronger economy than Dominica is. Without the CBI, they have built an airport during that time, an international airport. They've strengthened their tourism. We have a much better tourism product compared to St. Vincent by far, light years ahead. but they've gone ahead, they built their airport. So we can use our resources, as I said, to do a lot of this, to do a lot of it. And that is what we have to look to, you know. So what I'm saying is this: any future development for Dominica must consider that aspect. How can we use what we have, our natural herbs, water, our essential oils, how we can use those to really generate and make money, do some factories, do the different do pastas, do flour, you know, all of this can be done. These are things that can be done, and it's not rocket science. You don't, all you need is just a little bit of thinking, you know, and then you can even attract foreign direct investment firms to do this. You can give targeted incentive. You can give foreigners an incentive to do a particular focus on a particular resource, and you give them some good conditions to come in, you know, and they would. So we can do that, Alvin. I mean, the fact that we have not done it, I think, speaks more to the failure of this administration than anything else.
Yes, indeed. Thanks, Doc. I think we have a call on the line. We can take that caller. Caller, good evening to you. You're on to Civic Vibes. Go right on.
Good evening, Lofty. Good evening, Mr. Fountain. Welcome back. What a sacrifice. God bless you and your family.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Fountain, we're saying what we want to do, Dominica, but I don't hear the debts in Dominica yet. Our debt and where we are, we haven't invested in manufacturing. We haven't invested in our young people. We haven't invested in tourism, and our debt ratio, our debt is 1.6 billion, plus we have an airport. Only God knows is 1.3 billion, scary say, but we already eat up so much into that already. We still digging holes. We have social security even get involved. And so many people we owing. Mr. Fontaine, how are we going to bring back Dominica after this guy already bring up the debt of Dominica so high? Because all what we're talking, they're going to take money. Secondly, the little rate he gives people water rate going up. So that's going to erase the rate because it's more people joining Dominica. So, Mr. Fontaine, tell us how we're going to do that. God bless Dominica. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, caller. Very succinct points, Rizia. Doc, you want to respond in terms of the high debt and also the
it's a very good question.
But, you know.
Yeah. No, there is a real burden to debt. Huh? That's why it's referred to as the debt burden. Outside of the fact that you're in debt and you know it as an individual, when you're in debt and you can't even sleep because you wonder, how are you going to get out of this? Just like a country in debt is a real burden because the country, in order for you to maintain your status, you have to keep servicing that debt. And that is why it becomes very important because your debt servicing becomes an issue. Monies that you otherwise would have used to probably fix a pothole or to provide supplies for a school, you now have to use that money to service that debt. Because the moment you stop servicing the debt, the moment you default on your debt, then you cannot borrow any further. And that's the reason why we talk about the debt burden. And especially in a situation where you are borrowing more, your debt is increasing more compared to what you're actually spending, is going to be a problem. It definitely is going to be a problem, you know?
Yeah, Doc, in addition to what the caller asked, I had this discussion with this very esteemed businessman in Dominica. And basically he was saying that he would support any group of people, and he was referring to political party now, that would put clearly on the objective, as part of the objective, the situation where they would do what they have to do to help clean up the image of Dominica, especially on an international front. He was referring to our CBI program in particular, whereby there are a lot of persons who are known criminals who are in possession of our passports. And the sort of high debt that our country has placed itself in over the period of years. And so he was saying to me, that is one of the priority issues that any party wanting to take the reins of power in this country would have to pay critical attention to, and would spell it out to the Dominican people as to just how they're going to at least fix those two things. One, the high debt, and secondly, the image of Dominica. Could you just speak to that in terms of how do you sort of start to counteract those things?
Okay, let me start with the high debt. Alvin talked earlier about St. Kitts and Nevis having a debt ratio of about 64% to GDP. When I went to St. Kitts in 2012, 2013, the debt to GDP ratio was the second highest in the world. Japan was at 156%, St. Kitts was at 143%, the second highest in the world. And my task was to give a strategy, devise a debt strategy for St. Kitts and Nevis that would allow them to come down, to bring the debt ratios down, because it was really hurting the country. So what I started by doing, and this is what I would do in a country like Dominica, is to talk to the creditors. Okay, the fortunate thing about St. Kitts in that sense was that they had a high ratio of domestic debt. So a lot of the debt was owed to the banking system, it was owed to Social Security, and to some insurance companies. So my first task when I got to St. Kitts was to sit with the Social Security, to sit with the banks. I got to know all the bank managers in St. Kitts and Nevis, sit with them and see if they could provide some relief to the government. Say, here is what we're looking at. We look at the maturity, we see when the debt is coming due. So I look at every line of debt to every institution. I know when it is coming due. Some debts, you have what I call a balloon payment, where you have to pay a huge amount within a couple of years. So you look at the type of debt, and then you now sit down and you negotiate with the bank, with the Social Security. All right, these debt are at a rate of let's say 10%. Okay, the government borrowed from you at 10%, and it is for 20 years at 10%. At the end of the day, this is the amount the government is going to pay back in interest and in principal. Now, if we can give you a deal where instead of 20 years, we have some resources, because the EU had given some resources because they were just coming out of the sugarcane industry. And the same way the EU had given money when we were losing the bananas, I think they gave it through Stabex. They had given some monies through a fund, through an agriculture fund. So the government had some resources that they could offer, say, okay, we can give you, instead of paying you back over 20 years at those high rates of interest, what if you drop the rate? All right, so you give us a reduced rate. We do the recalculation, and we divide. We can pay you, instead of 20 years, we can pay you back in 4 years. Will you agree to that? Okay, so that's what you do. You sit and you negotiate with your creditors. I said St. Kitts was very good in that case, in that they were dealing with locals. I mean, if I remember correctly, the ratio of domestic to foreign debt was like maybe 65 to 45%. Now, it's a bit more difficult if you have foreign creditors, but it's not impossible. You can do a similar thing, and most creditors are willing to negotiate if you're offering them money up front. Okay? If you're offering them money up front, as long as the amount you're offering them is probably more than what you borrowed in the first case. And even then, in some cases, if they're getting a lump sum of money, they would prefer to have it now as again stretched out over 15, 20 years. So that is what you do in terms of the debt. You can negotiate with your creditors, and that's absolutely what you would need to do. In the case of Dominica, we'd have to negotiate with the National Bank of Dominica, where most of the debt sits from the domestic sector. Government have been borrowing from from National Bank. They have transformed their overdrafts to loans. So you'll have to sit with them and negotiate that. So that's how you deal basically with that aspect of the high debt levels. It has to be negotiated, but it can be done. It was done successfully in St. Kitts and Nevis through negotiation, through an understanding of trying to help the country, and you have to put in broader terms. You have to explain to them, yeah, if you're able to do this, then that releases some resources for the country that can now be invested in productive areas that's going to grow. If you have growth in the economy, you have more people now who are going to be working. There are more people who are going to be saving in the banking system. So it's a win-win for everybody. All right. But you have to be able to show that and prove to them that that is possible if that is done. So that would have to be the way forward for high levels of debt, through negotiating with our creditors. There's just no two ways about it. You have to negotiate. Some countries, what they also do as well is that they sell the debt. So you could for example, there are companies that specialize in this, right? So they will come to you and they will offer you a deal. They will offer to buy your debt at a certain price. Okay, so they will say, okay, if you owe $50 million, we are going to buy that 50 million debt from you so that you're relieved of it, and they in turn now package that among credit. But that's a lot more complicated, and it's not a lot of people into that space. And usually they only do that for countries that are really advanced countries that wealthy and they can get, because usually some huge amounts of debt. But countries like us will probably not qualify for that kind of negotiation. So most likely it would have to be just bilaterals with the banks, with the Social Security, to see how best we can reduce the level of debt, reduce the burden, as I said, you have a real burden. The burden is in the repayment, or you can reduce those debt levels. Yeah. And there was a second part.
The second leg to that question is the CBI program in terms of the image of Dominica.
Oh, yes. How do you repair the image?
Yeah.
Well, I think the surest way to repair this is, all of these individuals who've been identified as criminals, you revoke their passports. Simple. Anybody who has committed a crime and has sullied the country's name, you revoke their passport. I think that is how you deal with that particular aspect of it. Yeah. But let me just warn, as I talk about revoking the passports, as a country, you have a certain responsibility. The fact that we have 45,000 persons holding Dominican passports, these passports are going to come due. They're going to renew. Our passports only last 10 years. People are going to be renewing their passports. When they come for renewal, you cannot tell them they cannot renew their passport because they've not committed any crime. They invested in a legal program. Yeah. So as a government, you have to honor that. But I think for those who have really committed crime and who basically are soiling the image of the country, that could be one way of dealing with it.
True. All right, folks, we are down to the wire. In like 5 minutes time, we're going to bring down the program here. 2 comments here coming to me privately. Let me just read those comments and then go to Brother Alvin for his final comments, and also Dr. Thompson Fontaine indeed. This comment here, it reads, it's so unfortunate that we've moved so far away from agriculture and manufacturing that our youth, 30 years and under, have no recollection of where we were when Kubuli. Okay, let me just take that call and I'll get back to that comment here. Caller, yes, good evening to you, Civic Vibes, limited time.
Yeah, good evening.
Yes, good evening.
Yeah, I have 2 comments. My first comment really is on the response given by Dr. Fountain in regard to the impact of the BRICS and how it will cause a devaluation of the US dollar. I think that is something that we, as the OECS, have to pay close attention to, because this is real as the de-dollarizing of international trade continues by more countries entering the BRICS. it will significantly reduce the demand for the US dollar. Other things being equal, it will bring down the exchange rate or the nominal exchange rate of the US dollar. All of our reserves are in the US dollar. Also, the US is being our major trading partner. So if the US dollar falls, US import is going to be higher. Prices in the United States will go up. The US being our major trading partner means the cost of our import will certainly rise. And that will significantly impact on our cost of living in the OECS. Also, we have non-US dollar denominated debts. So most times when we have to pay our Chinese loans or perhaps loans from the United Emirates, Arab Emirates, etc., we have to take that US dollar to buy the other currencies to service our external debt that are not denominated in US dollars. So as a result, the cost for servicing those debts will rise anytime the US dollar falls. So I think that although he is saying that it's not going to devalue easily, but certainly there will be a certain degree of devaluation as the demand for the US dollar falls, because the US currency is a floating currency. Other things being equal, once demand falls, it's going to reduce the price of that currency, right?
All right, caller, thank you very much for your point here. We have very limited time, but let me just let Dr. Thompson Fontaine respond, and then we're going to wrap up. Yes.
Yeah, no, the caller, I think the caller is spot on. The only thing I would be cautious with, in terms of how he described it, he's exactly right. I think where we disagree a little bit is in terms of the impact of the BRICS and whether the BRIC economies. I gave you the example of some of the strongest economies in the world coming together with the euro. It did not have the impact that they thought it would have on the dollar, because for the rest of the world, they still relied on the dollar. His argument is that with the BRICS, people will move away from the US dollar in substantial numbers. And that is where I think we have a slight disagreement. I don't necessarily see that happening anytime soon. And that's why I use the example of the euro. The fact it did not happen with the euro, where you had even stronger countries. I mean, these economies are not, these are strong economies. You cannot compare, for example, the German economy with the Brazilian economy. Germany is probably 3-4 times the size of the Brazilian economy. So this idea that the BRICS will somehow push the US dollar aside is probably not going to happen, because again, even countries where the euro is used, you can still end up using the US dollar. And the question is whether or not the US dollar will be moved aside to such an extent where it is extremely weak. And so if you're holding US dollars, then your value goes down and so on to that big extent. And I think that is where the debate really is, whether or not the BRICS can get to that point where they are so powerful that they have a huge impact on the US dollar.
All right. Yeah. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Doc. Thank you for that response here. I was reading a comment earlier before that caller. Let me just read that comment here. And we're going to take a little break, play that ad from the Marigot Development Corporation, and then ask our guests here, Dr. Thompson Fontaine and also Alvin Thomas for their final comments. Let me just read that note again. It says here, it's so unfortunate that we moved so far away from the agricultural and the manufacturing sector that our young people, those who are under 30 years of age, have no recollection of where we were when Kubuli, Bello, Benjo's, Simas, Coca-Cola factory, and lastly, Paul's pasta, operated successfully, employing hundreds of people. Yes, we made and consume most of our pasta products processed right here in Dominica. All of this is no more, and we need to go back to those days. All right, that is the point that a caller is raising here, or a listener is sending me via message here. All right, guys, it is already after 8, so we're already out of time, but let me just play that ad right about now. And we're going to get back to you guys for your final closing comments. Yes, let's do that ad.
Join us for a day of wellness at MDC's Marigot Village Health Fair, taking place Friday, May 3rd, 2024, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at W.S. Stevens Primary School, Weirs, Marigot. Come get free health checks, including cervical, breast and prostate screening, blood pressure and diabetes check. This event is presented by Fresh Market Pharmacy and St. Andrew's Hospital Foundation in collaboration with the Marigot Health District and supported by Trois Pitons Water, Q95 FM, Afu Awi Big Shop, Digicel, Country Style Bread, and the Marigot Development Corporation, MDC. Don't miss this opportunity to prioritize your health with us. Remember, your health is your wealth. See you there. Join us for a day of wellness at MDC's Marigot Village Health Fair.
All right, thank you very much indeed. That is something that you need to look out to from the Marigot Development Corporation standpoint. We also seen some more comments coming in here from Joshua Francis and others, but unfortunately, we cannot take any more comments now. Joshua Francis, I know that you're economist, and so based on your comments here, I'll be reaching out to you sometime, sir, to see if just you'd be able to make your way here so that you can contribute in some way, shape, or form to the conversations that we have in here. All right, Joshua. So please stay tuned indeed. Gentlemen, it's 5 past. We have to go, but our wrapping up final comments.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Lofty. It certainly has been. Oh, sorry.
Yes, Doc. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, right. Okay, great. I thought it would be nice that the host closes up as against me having to have the final word. I just wanted to say, it was really an interesting conversation, and I think we need to have more of these types of conversations with the Dominican public, for people to understand what is going on. I know you don't necessarily need to understand everything, but to get a better idea as to how things work and how things are. And people need to understand that what we have in Dominica is not normal. No salary increases. People are going to be driven into poverty. You cannot maintain that situation where you don't give salary increases for all of those years. You don't have a minimum wage in place. You're going to drive people crazy. You're going to drive them to poverty. You're going to drive them to run away from the country. So there are implications, and people need to understand what those implications are. So I hope tonight in our conversation, we're able to shed some light on some of those issues. I like the concept of I like the idea of the currency part that was brought in. I mean, that is my whole thesis. That's where I looked at very, very closely. And there is so much that goes into it. There's so much that goes into, why one day one currency is up, down the other day, and so on. The way sentiments are built into the market. Speculation, so much that goes into it. And I'm very happy that your callers were astute enough to raise some of those questions and those issues, since ultimately we in Dominica, we are part of the global marketplace. We trade, we buy, we travel, we receive remittances from abroad. So ultimately what happens with currencies is going to impact us. So I was very happy for that aspect of it. And overall, just pleased at the conversation, and I was able to see several of those comments as well that came in. Very happy for those comments, and let me just say a big thank you to all those who joined, the hundreds of people I see, Lofty, that were with us tonight. And I'm really thankful for the opportunity, and just want to wish everyone Godspeed and have a good night. Yeah.
All right. Well, Doc, on behalf of Civic Vibes and the many, many folks, the multitudes of fans who normally follow us each and every Sunday, we want to say thank you very much, my brother, for taking time off your busy schedule. I know you're a busy man, but you always take time off for Civic Vibes whenever you're called upon, and we appreciate your time indeed. So thank you very much for your invaluable contribution to tonight's program.
Thank you.
All right, indeed. All right, Alvin, that leaves
Yes.
two of us now basically to bring the curtains down.
Yes, well, let me in as I conclude with my comments, let me just reference a document that I sort of referred to earlier, and that is the acronym OECD.
Your audio is going in and out. Your audio is going in and out.
Can you hear me? Are you hearing me a little better now? Is it better?
Yes.
Is it better? Okay.
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Okay, great. Thank you. I was saying that the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, issued a document recently, very, very recent this year, where they, and let me just quote from part of the executive summary of that document. It's called Project OECD Support to Organization of Eastern Caribbean State, OECS, Strategy Implementation, aim at assisting the OECS region in achieving development through the implementation of the regional development strategy. So they're trying to put together a strategy that would help promote or enable the development of the OECS region. And it says here, since the creation in 1981, the OECS has been at the forefront of the process of regional integration between its independent member states. Building on the existence in the region of a single currency, the Eastern Caribbean dollars, the OECS established an economic union in 2010. Its aim includes the free movement of capital, labor, and goods. Today, the OECS faces the challenge of finding new model of development that can carry the region towards sustainable, dynamic, and inclusive growth, and that can help it overcome declining growth rate. We hear Dr. Fontaine talk about the growth rate. Persistent unemployment, disparities between its members, and the fallout from recurrent extreme weather event and the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Towards this end, the OECS designed a joint development strategy for its member countries in 2018. The strategy runs from 2019 to 2028 and is organized around three main pillars. The first of these is generating economic growth. The second is promoting human and social well-being. And the third is the sustainable use of natural endowment, unquote. That's just part of the executive summary. Why am I saying that? I'm saying that to say that even within the OECS, they recognize what we are discussing here tonight. And if where you find a public sector, a government is unable to provide that kind of thrust for development, it inhibits the development of the private sector. So although we didn't spend much time on the private sector, but the private sector is unable to function in the way that the private sector should function. If the public sector is having we're having those challenges in terms of low growth rate, high debt to GDP ratio, high debt outstanding. So clearly the road ahead for us is not an easy road, but at the same time, based on what Dr. Fontaine said, and which I tend to agree, it is achievable. We can do it. Other countries have done it in the region, and we can do it. But my personal view, if you ask me, it can only be done with a new leadership. That's the only way I see it. It can be done with a new leadership. I think this current administration have run out of ideas. They no longer seem to care. They no longer seem to have service as they are in the forefront of serving the people who elected them. And I think that is where we're at the moment. And this is where we need to strategize. Each one of us play our part individually and collectively to ensure that we have a government that looks into the best interests of the people and can turn around our economic woes that we have right now. That's on how I would conclude. And to say to all those who are still with us, thank you. Thanks to Dr. Fontaine. I think he did a splendid job in his delivery today. And yes, there were a lot of comments on the feed, a lot of comments, different point of view. And that's what the democracy is all about, to have different point of view. But overall, I think we had a great engagement, both with Dr. Fontaine's presentation and some of the comments that came on the feed. So thank you, Lofty. Everyone have a great week, a great productive week, safe and a blessed week.
Jealousy, not by we, certainly. We got to fight hypocrisy. Oh, conspiracy. Jealousy, not by we, certainly. Tomorrow is the first day. The rest of our lives, let's make tomorrow the first day of the rest of our lives. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity.
All right, Dominica, that is it. Thank you very much for your eyes and ears each and every time. Dr. Fontaine, thank you very much, my brother. Splendid contribution to tonight's program. To all of you fans here and abroad, pleasant good evening to you. See you next week, same time, same place, next week, Sunday.
This is a real crime.
Let's take the last verse from Joy Stout and we're out. Bye-bye. We love you.
As a people, we have to change this old attitude and give our country all the love we really should. Instead, we sit and we criticize, where we say let's now analyze and give young people no scope in difficult times just how to cope. It's up to build them the foundation in order to build a stronger, vibrant nation. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity to make Dominica strong. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an opportunity to make Dominica strong. We got to stamp out wickedness, stamp out all slackness, jealousy, not by we, certainly. We got to stamp out the negative, what's unproductive, treachery, not by we, certainly. Tomorrow is the first day. The rest of our lives, let's make tomorrow the first day of the rest of our lives. We have an opportunity to change things around, an opportunity to change things, an